Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Blue Ox baseplate on a 2020 Ford F-150. This baseplate system is going to be a required component of flat towing a vehicle, and this is where your arms of your tow bar actually connect onto using some pins. Now, this does take away your factory tow hooks, but you do have these safety chain loops that could probably be used as well. Now, when not in use, you can also pull this pin, give it a twist, and you can see where it actually hooks onto. So this fork has this little hole here, and that's what you slide your pin through to attach to your arms. So this makes the solid connection between your motorhome and your vehicle. Also on here, you're going to see your safety cable loops. So you can attach those up from your motor coach, and that's going to keep you safe. Just in case any connection was to fail, you still have those chains holding the vehicle on. Now, as far as hooking it up to your actual tow bar, pretty simple. You can see this one says up, and you can see it feeds in these channels. So pretty simple. The arm kind of extends out. You can just run your pin through here. And as we have here, these are actual locking ones, and we do have those here available at eTrailer, and that's going to be nice because you can leave it hooked up and locked, and no one's going to be walking away with any of your components. Now, as far as installation goes, it's pretty straightforward. You do have to pull off your front bumper. Now, when putting this in place, you're also maybe going to want to leave that bumper off, because chances are if you're putting your base plate on, you're setting your vehicle up for a flat tow, and you're going to have to run a bunch of other components. So while this might be your first step doing it, it's okay to leave that bumper off. And what's really nice about this one is it does replace the tow hook, so there's no cutting involved. It bolts into place using the factory mounting spots. You do have to drill new hardware holes on the side, but it's using some of the factory mounting points to keep it in place while you do that. So it's a pretty simple installation overall. And I'm going to walk you through those steps, so we should be able to get that knocked out. To begin our installation, we're going to go ahead, we're going to be pulling off these panels here. Now, in order to do that, I'm using a plastic trim removal tool, and that way when I pry against it on the chrome part of the bumper, I'm not going to be scratching that. Another way you could do that is if you have a small credit card or something, you can simply put that behind it and maybe a flat head, but you want to make sure not to damage this. So to get this off, pretty easy. You're going to just kind of put that flat edge in here, and now you are going to have clips, so just be careful as you go around not to break them. They can be a little temperamental at times, but just be patient, and working your way around the entire clip is going to make it a lot easier. So on the inside here, there's going to be a yellow piece, and that's actually going to kind of slide out. So just kind of, once you get to this last one, be careful with it and push it towards the center, and that should work out. Now we're going to set this aside because we'll be reinstalling it later. So let's go ahead and knock out the other side. So now if your vehicle has adaptive cruise control, we're going to need to remove that as well. And there's just 3 11mm nuts, so we'll go ahead and remove those. Now during all of this process, you're going to want to make sure to hold on to all of your hardware for reinstallation. So find a nice way to organize them, whether it be in a cup or a baggie or whatever you have, and that way you have all your hardware when putting it all back. Now once you have your nuts loose, now this stud actually came out with mine, and that's okay as long as all the hardware's there. And to get this off, you just kind of pry at it, and it really does just snap off, but just be careful because the clips are plastic. Let's see if we can't get back here and pry this a little. Another thing is this is actually connected to an electrical connection, so when you do pull, make sure you're not pulling too far off, and that way you're not damaging your plug. So you can see here, it has like this little ball that it sits in, and so it pops in there, and that's really what we're trying to separate it with. We're just going to put a little pressure behind it and get this to pop off, hopefully. So going back with a little pry, I was able to pop this off, and you can see here, this stud actually came with it, and that's fine because there are weld nuts on here. So if you want to, you can go ahead and take the nut off and put that back in, but right now we should be okay. We're going to separate our electrical connection here. Just simply push up, and that comes off. Now set this aside, obviously, very important because we're going to be reinstalling this. So now we're underneath the front of the vehicle, and here on the passenger side, you're going to see this bolt here. It's a 21 millimeter, and we have another one on the other side, so we're going to go ahead and remove those real quick. So now on the front, where we removed our covers, you're going to see there's also two 21 millimeters here, as well as the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those. I am going to leave one on each side just threaded on. That way, if the bumper does want to come off, it's going to be held onto place. All right. So as you can see, the bumper is already starting to drop on its own, and those bolts are actually kind of dropping. So at this point, you're really going to want to be careful and maybe have an extra set of hands so that bumper doesn't come off. Now, to be careful, you want to also make sure when this bumper does come off, you're not just pulling and walking away. You do have your fog lamps that will be plugged in. So if you want, you can unplug them from there, or you can simply pull the bumper back and then unplug. So we're going to do that. So with our hardware off, you're going to see this portion of the bumper still might be attached here. Oh, there we are. So here we have our fog lamp plugs. I'm going to pull those off now. And just pulling up on these tabs should allow us to pull this out. If you need to, you can get a little flat head under there as well, and that should help. So before separating, you're going to see there's going to be plugs here, and this is going to be for adaptive cruise control. So your vehicle may not have it, but if it is equipped, you're also going to want to separate that. And you're going to see here, there's a plastic push pin, and that's just holding this wiring in. So you're also going to want to separate that. It does have a nice little pull tab here, and that should allow us to kind of get this moved up and out. Or it just separates like that. Either way, we have that separated. Check your other side before pulling back. With all of our wires unplugged, we can now set this aside. I've just kind of put some cardboard, and that way it's not going to get scratched. Next, we're going to be taking off a little plastic shroud here that goes on our tow hooks, and pretty simple, it just kind of peels off. Now that's going to allow us to get to these 15 millimeter bolts, and we're going to pull these tow hooks off. So you can go ahead and remove these. Now you're going to see this little plate that has the weld nuts onto it. You're going to want to make sure that you keep this with it. So now we're going to get ready to put our actual base plate, and we're going to be using our same little bracket that we had and the existing hardware from our tow hooks. Now before we put it back up, from the factory it does have a thread lock, and we're going to go ahead and do the same on these. So what I'll do is I'm going to feed one through the bottom here, just to kind of get it in place. And then once you have a few threads in, that's going to allow you to kind of have this to kind of hold on there. And what I'll be doing here is actually taking my thread lock, putting it on that back one, and that's still going to allow me to have some threads I can put it on while it's holding it in place. And that should be more than enough there. Once you have them thread locked and hand tightened through so they're both lined up, we can then go ahead and zip them up pretty tight. Now, you don't have to get too crazy because we're going to go back with the torque wrench and make sure they're at the proper spec. Now also you're going to want to leave just a little bit of wiggle room because we're going to be drilling through here, and so we're going to want this plate completely against the side there. Now they are slotted on the bottom, so again, don't make it too tight. You can push it against that end there, and that way drilling these in will be a little bit easier. Now that we have this, we'll go ahead and we'll do the other side. So now with those tightened up, we have our thread lock on there, and we have the plates really against the frame as much as we can. We're going to go back and with the torque wrench, torque those down to the specifications in the instructions. Now if you don't have a torque wrench, we have them here at eTrailer, or generally you can rent them at an auto parts store. But this is an important step to make sure that these are bolted down well, but also in the proper spec where it's not too tight or too loose. So go through each four, make sure they're torqued properly. So now we're going to go on the side here where it's actually sitting against the frame. We're going to be drilling that out to run our new hardware through. So the drill bit recommended in the instructions is a 17/32. We're going to go through, get these zipped out, and make sure that the bolt actually fits through. Once we have that drilled out, test to make sure the bolt actually fits through. I'm also going to go through with a file on the back side and get some of those burrs, but before I do that, I'm going to knock out the other 3 holes. So now we're going to grab one of our bolts in our supplied hardware as well with a split washer, and that's going to feed in this back one. And the way we're going to get the nut on the back is using our little weld plate here with the nut attached. So we're going to kind of slide that right in front of the hole, feed this in, and we'll get this tightened up. So now we're going to be putting our supplied hardware on the 2 holes that we just drilled out. Now on the front, it's going to be pretty simple. We'll put a little bit of Loctite or thread lock here. And you can see I have my split washer. We're going to do that with the other one as well. But on the front, we're going to be using our nylon lock nut. And you should be able to get your hands on there pretty easy. So I'm just going to hand tighten that until it snugs up real quick. And then our back side, again, we'll go back with the thread lock on there. Now to get to that back hole, seems like it'd be pretty tricky, but here we have a flange nut that's welded onto this little piece of metal here, and that's going to allow us to kind of get this lined up right where we need it to be, and then hand thread this on. And the way I'm going to do this, you can see right here in this frame hole, I can actually access that wire, and that's going to be really nice for when I tighten this down. Eventually we'll have to cut this off, so instead of going in there, we should be able to access that with some snips and clip those off. So now we're going to tighten up the front one first using a 3/4 inch wrench as well as a 3/4 inch socket. So I'm going to put this here on the nut just to kind of hold it in place. We'll kind of get this zipped into place here. Make sure your welded flange nut bar isn't in the way of tightening it. And now this back side, we can kind of just hold this in place and kind of zip this down. Now we're going to go ahead and repeat that same process on the other side. So now we have all of our hardware torqued down to the proper spec with our torque wrench. Now we're going to get this wire, and now if you can access it from the side and you have something that can cut it, awesome. I tried with our snips, it didn't work too well, so there's other options. You can actually take a rotary tool, a small one in there, and cut that off. I'm actually going to try something here. I got my pry bar, and I think if I just kind of put it right where that weld is and right where the bar meets the flange nut, we should be able to knock that loose. Just like that. For our next step, we're going to be taking our safety cables here, and this is going to protect this from coming off in case of whatever might happen, whether it be the hardware failing. Either way, it's going to keep this attached to the base plate to the frame of the vehicle, so it's going to be a solid connection. So the way we're going to do this is we're actually going to route it over, and this way I have this inner frame rail as well as this outer portion here, and we're going to use this hook right here on this hole. So let's see if we can't get these fed on there. And it is kind of a tight fit here, so you may have to kind of play around with it. So once you kind of get these hooked on, simply tighten this down. I'm going to go back with a wrench and just make sure that it's nice and secure. It can get a little tricky trying to get these to loop up. The main thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you're not making contact with any moving parts or anything that it could actually catch on. But I think this one should be good, so we'll tighten that up and we'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Now with our loops in place, we essentially have our base plate installed. Really all that's left to do is reinstall our bumper in the reverse order that we took it off. Now if you are doing a flat toe setup, you do have other electrical components that you'll be running, so it's probably a good idea to have this all exposed, and that way you can run the wires a little bit easier. But as far as base plate's concerned, we have it installed. And that was a look and installation of the Blue Ox tow bar on a 2020 Ford F-150. Thanks for watching.